The colony was dead. The air still carried the bitter smoke of fire, and the ground shook with the distant rumble of retreating ships. Buildings had collapsed into heaps of broken stone and twisted steel. The mechanic moved slowly through the wreckage, his boots crunching on glass. His body ached, his hands were torn from hours of digging through rubble, but he did not stop. He had survived the first wave of the attack, hiding in the wreckage of his workshop. When the bombardment ended, silence followed, heavy and unnatural. No voices, no movement, only the wind that carried the smell of burned homes. He had walked into the streets, searching not for survivors, but for something to do. Anything. A broken machine, a trapped voice, even one chance to fix what little he could. That was when he heard it. At first, he thought it was his mind playing tricks on him. A faint, high sound. A whimper. A sob. He froze, every muscle in his body tense. Slowly, he followed it, pushing aside scorched panels, burned cloth, and chunks of concrete. The sound grew louder until he lifted a broken piece of wall, and there she was. A child. Not human. Her skin was pale silver, cracked in places where he'd had scorched her. Small scales shimmered weakly along her arms, and her large eyes blinked up at him in terror. She clutched her knees close, trembling. Her clothes, once fine, were torn and stained with soot. The mechanic stared at her, breath caught in his chest. He knew what she was. Everyone did. The crest on her forehead marked her bloodline. She was Zari royalty of the alien empire that ruled with an iron fist. The same empire whose soldiers had burned his colony to ash. He should have walked away. If the soldiers found her, they would take her back. If they found him with her, they would kill him on the spot. Helping her was death. That much he knew. The child's lips trembled. A soft voice escaped her throat, broken but clear. "Please, don't leave me." He felt his chest tighten. He thought of his own daughter, years ago, before the sickness took her. The memory hit him like a knife. Her face, her laughter, the way she used to reach for his hand. His knees weakened. He could not walk away. The mechanic crouched down, his voice low and steady. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you." The girl blinked, startled by the gentleness in his tone. Slowly, she reached toward him. Her hand was small, trembling, covered in soot. He wrapped his calloused fingers around it, and in that single moment, the decision was made. He lifted her carefully into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile, like carrying broken glass. He adjusted her against his chest, then turned toward the shadows of the ruined street. Above, a deep voice boomed from a speaker that echoed across the colony ruins. "Attention, citizens. The daughter of the Zari monarch is missing. She must be returned to the guard. Anyone found sheltering her will be executed. The Empire thanks you for your loyalty." The mechanic's blood ran cold. They were already searching. Heavy footsteps sounded in the distance. The elite guard had landed. He had seen them before, towering figures in black armor, faces hidden behind silver visors. They carried plasma rifles that could melt stone in a single shot. These were not soldiers, these were hunters. Once they had their orders, they never stopped until the target was found. The girl shivered in his arms. "They're coming," she whispered. He clenched his jaw, his eyes scanning the broken street. His heart pounded, but his voice was calm. "Hold on tight." He ran. Through smoke and fire, he darted across the ruins, boots slipping on broken stone. Behind him, shouts rose. Metal boots thundered as the soldiers spread out in formation. Plasma bolts hissed through the air, exploding walls into dust. One shot seared past his shoulder, close enough to scorch his sleeve. He tightened his grip around the child and pushed forward. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he did not stop. The girl's small arms clung around his neck. Her breath was hot and uneven against his skin. Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice tiny, full of fear. His answer came without hesitation, as if carved into him long ago. "Because no one else will." They reached a collapsed bridge, its structure half buried in rubble. He slid down the slope, landing hard but keeping her safe in his arms. The sound of pursuit grew louder. The soldiers were closing in. From behind the visor of one, a deep voice growled across the comm. "You think you can protect her, human? She belongs to the Empire." The mechanic turned, his body shaking but his gaze hard. "Not while I breathe." The soldier raised his rifle. Plasma hummed. The mechanic's mind screamed at him to drop her, to run, to save himself. But he did not move. He pulled the girl tighter against his chest, turning his body into a shield. The first plasma round screamed through the air. He dove, twisting, covering her completely. The shot struck stone beside them, blasting heat and smoke into the air. His ears rang, but his arms did not loosen. The child's eyes widened as she looked up at him. For the first time, she saw not fear, but something else in his face. "A promise," he whispered, through ragged breath. "They'll have to go through me." The soldiers advanced, rifles raised, black armor gleaming. The hunt had truly begun. And yet, the mechanic felt no regret. For the first time since his daughter's death, he knew why he was alive. He was a shield now. And shields don't break. The mechanic's chest heaved as smoke and dust filled the air. The plasma blast had torn through the wall beside him, spraying molten stone in every direction. His ears rang, his vision blurred, but his arms never loosened around the child. The soldiers advanced in formation, black armor glinting in the fading light. They moved without hesitation, their visors glowing faintly, rifles humming as the cores powered up for another shot. He staggered to his feet, still shielding the girl. His voice, rough but steady, cut through the smoke. "You'll have to kill me first." The leader of the squad stepped forward. His armor was marked with silver stripes, his movements sharp and confident. His voice came through the comm, cold and commanding. "A single human against the guard? You are nothing. Give us the child, and your death will be quick." The mechanic's hands trembled, but his eyes burned with something stronger than fear. "No." A plasma round screamed toward them. He rolled behind a slab of collapsed concrete, the blast searing across his back as he dove. The girl whimpered but stayed silent, her tiny fingers digging into his shirt. The soldier's voice echoed again, this time with a hint of mockery. "You think you can protect her forever? You will die, and she will belong to us." The mechanic pressed his back against the slab, breathing hard. His mind raced. He had no weapons, no training, nothing but his body and his will. And yet he could not give up. He whispered to the girl, keeping his voice calm despite the chaos. "Stay quiet. Don't let go of me, no matter what happens." She nodded, her large eyes brimming with tears. Another blast shook the rubble. Shards of concrete rained down around them. He pulled her tighter into his chest, shielding her with his body. Pain flared across his shoulder, but he ignored it. He had to move. Staying here meant death. Scanning the ruins, he spotted a narrow service tunnel half buried beneath debris. It was small, twisted, and dangerous, but it was their only chance. He glanced at the girl. "Hold on." With a deep breath, he sprinted. Plasma fire lit the air behind them, bolts screaming past his legs and arms. One struck the ground just ahead, blasting a crater in the dirt. He jumped, diving into the tunnel entrance, scraping his arms raw against the jagged metal as he slid inside. The tunnel was dark, cramped, filled with the smell of rust and ash. He crawled forward on elbows and knees, dragging the girl with him. She clung to his back, silent except for her quick, trembling breaths. Behind them, the soldiers shouted. Their heavy boots shook the ground as they closed in. A metallic clang echoed as one of them fired into the tunnel, but the angle was wrong. The shot hissed against the walls, scorching metal but missing flesh. The mechanic kept crawling, every muscle straining. His lungs burned, his throat was dry, but he forced himself forward, inch by inch. The sound of pursuit grew fainter, but he knew they weren't gone. The guard never stopped. Finally, the tunnel opened into a collapsed hangar bay. The ceiling was half-caved, light filtering through cracks above. Burned-out vehicles lay scattered across the floor, broken wings and shattered engines like the bones of dead giants. The mechanic pulled himself out, then lifted the girl to her feet. He crouched low, scanning the shadows. For the moment, it was quiet. The girl tugged at his sleeve. Her voice was small but steady. "Why do they want me?" He looked at her, sweat running down his face. He had suspected the truth from the moment he saw her crest. But hearing her ask it now made his chest tighten. "You're important to them," he said carefully. "You're not just any child, are you?" She lowered her eyes. "I'm the daughter of the monarch." The words confirmed his fear. She was not just a refugee. She was the one person the Zari Empire would move heaven and earth to find. He rubbed a hand across his face. "That explains why they're hunting you so hard." Her lip trembled. "They'll never stop, will they?" He crouched down so he could look her in the eye. His voice was firm, even though inside he felt the weight of doom pressing down on him. "No. They won't. But I will never let them take you." She blinked, surprised. "Even though I'm not human?" For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. His daughter's face flashed in his memory, the laughter, the warmth, the love he had lost. "You're just a child," he whispered. "And children deserve to be safe. That's all that matters." Her eyes glistened with tears, but this time they weren't from fear. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his chest. For the first time since finding her, she allowed herself to believe him. The moment was cut short. A distant clang echoed through the hangar. The soldiers were coming. The mechanic's heart pounded. He scanned the bay desperately for an escape. His eyes caught a half-destroyed service cart, one of the small vehicles used to tow ships. Its engine casing was cracked, but maybe, just maybe, he could make it run. He set the girl down gently. "Stay close. Don't move." Then he rushed to the cart, pried open the panel, and shoved his grease-stained hands into the mess of wires and circuits. Sparks flew as he twisted metal together, sweat dripping into his eyes. The girl watched silently, clutching her knees. The sound of boots grew louder. Voices barked commands. The guard had entered the hangar. "Almost there," he muttered. His fingers worked furiously, reconnecting wires, bypassing safety locks. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared weakly to life. He spun to the girl. "Get in." She scrambled onto the seat beside him, her small hands gripping the rail. The soldiers burst into view, rifles raised. Plasma cores glowed as they prepared to fire. The mechanic slammed his hand on the throttle. The cart screeched forward, sparks flying as its damaged engine strained. Plasma bolts ripped past them, one striking the floor so close that the heat seared his boots. The girl screamed, clinging to his arm. He gritted his teeth, forcing the vehicle faster, weaving between wreckage as the soldiers fired volley after volley. They were alive for now. But the hunt had only just begun. The service cart roared forward, its engine coughing like an old man's lungs. Sparks flew from the broken casing, and every bolt of plasma that hissed past threatened to be their last. The mechanic leaned low over the wheel, knuckles white. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the cracked floor ahead. The alien child sat pressed against him, her small hands gripping the rail so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Behind them, the elite guard gave chase. Their heavy boots thundered through the hangar as more soldiers poured in. Some leapt onto smaller pursuit bikes, sleek machines designed for speed and precision. Engines shrieked to life, and soon the black armored hunters were closing the gap. The mechanic cursed under his breath. The cart wasn't built for escape. It was meant to haul tools and scrap. Every time he pushed it faster, it threatened to shake itself apart. "Hold on," he shouted over the roar. The girl buried her face against his arm as plasma fire streaked past. One bolt struck the side of the cart, burning through the thin metal. Heat scorched his leg, but he didn't slow. Ahead, a massive breach yawned in the hangar wall, an opening blasted during the bombardment. Beyond it lay the wastelands, endless dunes of ash and rock, the ruins of old battles long forgotten. Dangerous. Unforgiving. But right now, it was their only way out. The cart shuddered as they burst through the breach. The hangar fell behind them, swallowed by smoke and fire. The wastelands stretched out ahead, a broken horizon of jagged stone and shifting dust. The child lifted her head, her wide eyes full of fear. "They're still coming." The mechanic risked a glance back. The bikes were faster, built for open ground. Their riders moved in tight formation, weapons glowing, visors gleaming like hungry predators. "They won't stop," the girl whispered. He tightened his grip on the wheel. "Neither will I." The cart rattled across the uneven ground, bouncing so hard he thought it might flip. Each jolt slammed through his spine, but he held steady. He scanned the terrain ahead, searching desperately for something, anything that could give them cover. To the right, a ridge of black stone jutted out of the sand like the bones of some giant beast. If he could reach it, maybe he could lose the bikes in the rocks. He jerked the wheel, steering toward the ridge. Plasma bolts followed, carving molten scars into the dirt beside them. One bike surged ahead, cutting across their path. Its rider leveled a rifle, aiming straight for the cart. The mechanic's eyes narrowed. He yanked the wheel hard, slamming the side of the cart into a jagged boulder. The impact sent sparks flying and nearly threw them both off, but the sudden move also sent shards of rock spraying across the path. The pursuing bike hit the debris at full speed. Its rider lost control, spinning wildly before slamming into the sand in a burst of fire. The child gasped. You stopped him." "Only one," the mechanic muttered, eyes fixed ahead. "There are more." They tore into the ridge, weaving between sharp outcroppings. The narrow paths forced the bikes to spread out, slowing their pursuit. Plasma blasts echoed off the stone, their light flashing in the shadows. The mechanic gritted his teeth, steering through tighter and tighter gaps. The cart scraped the stone, sparks flying, but it held together. He knew it couldn't last much longer. The girl clung to him, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this? Why risk everything, for me?" His throat tightened. For a moment, he didn't answer. He thought of his daughter again, her laughter, her small hand in his, the way her eyes had once held trust. The same trust he now saw in this alien child, desperate and afraid. At last, he said quietly, "Because I couldn't save her. But I can save you." The girl stared at him, her eyes wide. She didn't understand everything he meant, but she felt the weight of his words. She pressed closer against him, no longer out of fear, but out of something else. Trust. The cart jolted violently, a wheel striking a deep crack in the ground. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared weakly again. He swore under his breath. They burst out of the ridge and into another open stretch. The guard was still behind them, fewer now, but relentless. The wasteland stretched endlessly, no sign of safety anywhere. Then the mechanic saw it, a broken starship half buried in the sand, its hull torn open like a carcass. It was ancient, long dead, but its shadowed wreckage could hide them if they reached it in time. He turned the cart toward it, every nerve screaming as plasma bolts streaked closer. The wreck loomed larger, jagged edges reaching like claws against the sky. Almost there, he muttered, forcing the throttle down. The cart rattled, groaned, and then sputtered. The engine screamed, coughed, and died. The vehicle slowed, smoke hissing from its battered frame. No, 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 come on. He pounded the dashboard, but it was no use. The cart rolled to a halt just short of the wreck. The girl's voice broke. They're coming. The mechanic leapt out, scooping her into his arms without hesitation. His legs burned with exhaustion, but he ran, pushing his body past its limits. Each step felt like fire in his veins, but the wreck was so close, just a few more strides. Behind them, the bikes closed in. The soldiers' voices rang out, harsh and commanding. He threw himself into the shadow of the starship's broken hull just as plasma fire exploded against the sand where they had stood. He scrambled deeper into the wreckage, ducking behind twisted beams and shattered panels. The girl clung to his neck, her breath ragged. He pressed her close, his own chest heaving. For now, they were hidden. For now, they were alive. But outside, the boots of the elite guard grew closer. The hunt was not over. It had only begun. The wrecked starship groaned in the wind, its torn hull like the ribs of some giant beast long dead. Rust streaked its bones, and the sand whispered against its jagged metal. Inside, shadows swallowed everything, the smell of oil and dust clinging to the air. The mechanic crouched low behind a twisted beam, the alien child tucked against his chest. His breathing was rough, chest heaving, but he forced it quiet. Every sound seemed louder here: his heartbeat, the girl's trembling breaths, the faint crack of cooling metal. Outside, the elite guard dismounted their bikes. Boots sank into the ash. Voices rang sharp, their words cold and merciless. Fan out. Search every inch. They are here. The mechanic's stomach twisted. He pressed the girl gently against the wall of the wreck. Stay still, he whispered. Not a sound. Her wide eyes met his. She nodded, pressing her lips together, though he could see the fear shaking through her. Through the cracks in the hull, he saw the soldiers moving. Black armor gleamed under the weak sun, their rifles glowing with deadly power. They moved like predators, slow and sure, their formation spreading like a net. The mechanic's hand curled into a fist. He had no weapon, nothing but his body and scraps of rusted metal around him. And yet he knew if they found her, he would fight until his last breath. The sound of boots grew closer. A soldier stepped inside the wreck. His visor glowed faintly, scanning the shadows. The hum of his rifle filled the air. The mechanic pulled the child tighter against him, lowering both of them into the dust. He pressed a hand over her trembling shoulder. She buried her face against his chest, her tiny hands clutching at his shirt. The soldier's heavy steps echoed, closer, closer. Each crunch of his boots sent a shiver through the mechanic's spine. He spotted a jagged piece of pipe half buried in the sand. His hand twitched toward it, fingers itching to grab it, to fight. But he froze. One wrong move, one sound, and they would both die. The soldier stopped just a few steps away. The silence was unbearable. Then, the comm crackled. Sector clear, a voice demanded. The soldier paused, visor turning slightly toward the shadows. For a heartbeat, the mechanic thought the end had come. Then the soldier turned back, his voice flat. Nothing. Moving on. The heavy steps retreated. The mechanic exhaled slowly, his lungs burning from holding his breath. He let his head fall back against the cold wall, eyes closing in brief relief. The girl looked up at him, her voice no more than a whisper. You didn't let go. He met her gaze. His throat tightened, but his answer came soft and firm. I never will. Her small hand reached up, brushing against his scarred cheek. It was such a fragile gesture, but it hit him harder than any plasma shot. For the first time since his daughter's death, he felt something he thought was gone forever, trust. But outside, the danger had not passed. More soldiers entered the wreck, their boots clanging against the hollow floor. Voices called out, closer this time. The mechanic scanned the shadows. He needed a way out. Then he saw it, a maintenance shaft, half buried under debris, leading deeper into the starship's skeleton. Narrow, dark, dangerous. But it might take them far enough from the soldiers' sweep. He turned to the girl. We have to move. Stay close to me. She nodded quickly, determination sparking in her frightened eyes. They crept low across the wreck, every movement slow, careful. The mechanic's muscles screamed from exhaustion, but he ignored it. Each step forward was survival. The shaft was tighter than he expected. Rusted metal scraped against his arms as he pulled the child through. The smell of decay was stronger here, mixed with the faint trace of fuel. Behind them, a soldier's voice echoed. Tracks fresh. The mechanic's heart froze. They had been found. Hurry, he whispered. He shoved the girl forward, crawling after her as the shaft closed in around them. His shoulders scraped the walls, dust choking his throat. Shouts rang out behind them. Boots clanged. A beam of light cut through the darkness as a soldier thrust his scanner into the shaft. The girl whimpered. The mechanic twisted, pressing himself against the narrow walls, shielding her with his body once more. Plasma fire hissed. The shot seared through the shaft, sparks exploding as the beam sliced across the metal just inches from his head. Heat burned his skin, but he didn't stop moving. They crawled, faster and faster, until the shaft opened into another chamber, a cavernous cargo bay, filled with shadows and the skeletal remains of containers. The mechanic pulled the girl out, his chest heaving. He scanned the vast, dark space, eyes darting for any path of escape. Come on, he muttered, tugging her hand. They slipped between rusted crates as the soldiers' voices grew louder in the shaft behind them. The girl tugged at his sleeve. They'll catch us. He shook his head, forcing strength into his voice. Not today. But even as he said it, he knew the truth. The guard was tightening their net. Every step forward only delayed the inevitable. Yet still he would fight. As they reached the far side of the bay, he spotted a half-collapsed bulkhead leading deeper into the ship. He pulled the girl through just as plasma bolts hissed past, striking the walls and showering sparks. The wreck groaned around them, metal straining under the assault. The child clung to him, her face buried against his chest. He tightened his hold, his voice steady even as the world shook. I'll get you out. I promise. And though the soldiers' shadows grew closer, the mechanic did not falter. He was no soldier, no hero. But he was a shield. And shields don't break. The wreck groaned as if it still remembered the day it fell. Every step inside echoed, the old ship's bones creaking with age and rust. The mechanic guided the alien child through the half-collapsed bulkhead, the smell of old oil and ash thick in the air. Behind them, shouts echoed. The elite guard were forcing their way deeper. Their heavy boots clanged like drums of death, their voices calm and merciless. They're here. Lock down the exits. Leave nothing unchecked. The mechanic pressed the girl against the wall, his hand steady on her shoulder. Stay quiet, he whispered. His voice was low but firm. She nodded, eyes wide, her small fingers clutching at his sleeve. The chamber they entered was vast, a cargo hold, long abandoned. Containers stood in crooked rows, some burst open, others sealed with rust. Dust hung in the air like mist. The mechanic's eyes scanned the shadows. He needed a way deeper, away from the guard. His gaze landed on a broken stairwell leading downward, into the belly of the ship. Dangerous, dark, but their only chance. Come on, he muttered, tugging the girl along. They slipped between containers, every movement careful, but the silence betrayed them. Somewhere above, a metal sheet shifted, clanging down with a crash. The girl froze, her breath catching. Move, the mechanic urged, pulling her forward. Shouts rose behind them. Lights flared. The guard had seen the movement. Plasma bolts ripped through the shadows, sparks bursting from walls and containers. The mechanic pushed the girl ahead, his own body shielding her. His back burned as a shot grazed him, heat searing flesh. He grunted in pain but never slowed. They reached the stairwell. The metal groaned under his weight, steps breaking as he half dragged, half carried the child downward. The guard's lights flickered in pursuit, beams cutting through the dust. The lower level was worse. Narrow corridors twisted like veins, pipes leaking steam, the air damp and foul. Every sound was magnified: the hiss of gas, the drip of water, their ragged breathing. The girl clung to his arm. "It's so dark," she whispered. He crouched, meeting her eyes. Even here, in the choking dark, he forced calm into his voice. "Dark means they can't see us either. Stay close." They crept forward, deeper into the wreck. The mechanic's mind raced. He had no plan beyond survival. But he could not let fear show. She needed him steady. They turned a corner and froze. A body lay slumped against the wall. Not human. Not guard. It was old, bones half covered in the remains of a uniform long rotted. A fallen crew member from the wreck, forgotten in the shadows. In its hands was something the mechanic recognized instantly, a weapon. Rusted, but intact. He knelt, pried it loose. The metal was cold, heavier than he expected. He checked the chamber. Still charged. His heart pounded as he realized he finally had more than his bare hands. The girl's voice shook. "Are you going to use it?" He looked at her, then at the weapon. He had never been a soldier. He had fixed engines, patched circuits, oiled gears. But now, with her life in his hands, he knew he would use anything. "If I have to," he said quietly. Boots clanged above. Voices drew nearer. The guard was spreading through the wreck like a tide. The mechanic pulled the girl behind him, clutching the weapon tight. He guided her into a maintenance shaft, low and narrow, where the walls dripped with condensation. They crawled, each scrape of metal loud in the silence. Halfway through, the girl whispered, "Why do they want me so badly?" He hesitated. The truth was heavy, but she deserved to hear it. "Because you're not just a child. You're their future. If they lose you, they lose their power." She was silent, her small face pale in the dim light. Finally, she whispered back, "And if they lose me, they'll kill you." He paused, his chest tightening. Then he said, steady and certain, "If it means you live, that's a price I'll pay." The shaft opened into a wide chamber filled with the remains of machinery, giant engines long dead, pipes broken and dripping. The air was heavy with steam. It felt like the heart of the wreck, still alive in its own broken way. The girl clung to him, her eyes darting at the shadows. "Do you think we can escape?" The mechanic looked at the weapon in his hand, then at the endless maze of broken steel around them. Escape felt impossible. But he forced a small smile, rough and tired but real. "Yes," he said. "We will." For a moment, hope flickered in her eyes. Then a voice boomed across the chamber. "There you are." The mechanic spun. The guard had found them. A squad stepped from the shadows, rifles raised, visors glowing. The leader's voice cut like steel. "You think you can hide in the bones of a dead ship? Fool! Give us the child. Now." The mechanic shoved the girl behind him, raising the weapon with shaking hands. His voice was hoarse, but unbroken. "You want her? You'll go through me." The soldiers spread out, their rifles humming. The girl clutched the mechanic's sleeve, fear filling her eyes. The chamber fell silent, the air heavy with tension. And then plasma fire lit the dark. The chamber shook as plasma fire cut through the dark. Bolts struck the walls, bursting in showers of sparks, the sound like thunder rolling inside a metal tomb. The mechanic's grip on the old weapon trembled, but he held it steady. He was no soldier. He didn't know formations or tactics. All he knew was that the child stood behind him, and between her and the guard there was only him. He fired. The weapon roared, the kick slamming into his shoulder. The blast struck one soldier square in the chest. The guard staggered, armor cracking, then collapsed in a shower of sparks. The child gasped, clutching her hands to her mouth. The mechanic's heart pounded. He had actually dropped one. For a brief moment, hope flickered inside him. But the others kept coming. Their formation shifted instantly, like predators circling prey. Rifles rose in unison, plasma bolts hammering into the chamber. Metal melted, pipes burst, steam poured into the air. The mechanic grabbed the child and pulled her behind a rusted engine block. Plasma fire seared the wall just inches from them, heat scalding his skin. He forced her lower, covering her with his own body. "Stay down," he shouted over the chaos. She pressed against him, her small frame trembling but silent. He peeked around the engine block. The guard advanced with precision, their black armor gleaming, visors cold and merciless. They moved like machines, every step measured, every shot perfect. He swallowed hard. He couldn't outshoot them. He couldn't outrun them. But he could make them bleed. He took a deep breath, then leaned out and fired again. The weapon screeched, the beam cutting across the chamber. It struck another soldier, spinning him sideways, his armor smoking. The rest didn't flinch. Plasma blasts tore into the engine block. The metal glowed red, then burst. Shrapnel rained down. The mechanic shielded the child with his arms, grunting as fragments tore into his back. Pain burned, but he refused to cry out. The girl's voice was small, frightened. "You're hurt." He gritted his teeth. "Doesn't matter. Keep your head down." The guard closed in. Their leader raised a hand, signaling for capture. "Take him alive. The child is priority." The mechanic's stomach twisted. Alive meant torture. Alive meant failure. He forced himself up, weapon shaking in his hands. His voice cracked but carried across the chamber. "You're not taking her." The leader tilted his head, visor reflecting the sparks and smoke. "You cannot stop us. You are nothing." The mechanic's hands tightened. His jaw clenched. "Then nothing will fight you." With a roar, he fired again. The blast slammed into the leader's shoulder, forcing him back a step. The other soldiers surged forward, plasma fire lighting the air like a storm. The mechanic grabbed the girl, pulling her deeper into the maze of broken engines. Plasma bolts carved the walls around them, each strike so close it rattled his teeth. He shoved her ahead, guiding her through a narrow gap between twisted beams. The soldiers followed, boots pounding, voices echoing. "Box them in. Don't let them escape." They crawled through a tunnel of rust and pipes, the air thick with steam. The mechanic dragged himself forward, one hand gripping the weapon, the other pushing the girl. His lungs burned, his wounds screamed, but he moved. They spilled out into another chamber smaller, darker, filled with the skeleton of a shattered reactor. The hum of old energy filled the air, faint but steady. The girl clung to his arm, her voice trembling. "We can't outrun them. They'll catch us." He looked at her, his face streaked with sweat and blood. His voice was hoarse but steady. "Then we don't run." She blinked, confused. What do you mean? He glanced at the reactor, its core still flickering faintly. Dangerous. Unstable. Deadly. An idea formed, wild and reckless, but it was all they had. If they want us, he whispered, then we make sure the cost is too high. He set the girl behind a collapsed panel. Stay here. Don't move until I say. Her small hand grabbed his wrist. Please, don't leave me. His chest ached. He squeezed her hand gently, forcing a smile. I'm not leaving. I'm buying us time. He turned back toward the reactor, raising the weapon. The soldiers entered the chamber, spreading out, rifles aimed. Their leader stepped forward, his voice calm and cruel. You cannot win. The mechanic's voice echoed in the shadows, low and defiant. Maybe not. But I can make sure you lose, too. Then he fired straight into the reactor. The chamber lit up with a blinding flash. The reactor screamed, sparks and lightning ripping through the air. The shock wave threw soldiers off their feet, their formation broken. The mechanic shielded the child as the world exploded in heat and light. When the smoke cleared, the chamber was chaos. The reactor crackled wildly, unstable. The guards scrambled to recover, their lines broken. The mechanic staggered to his feet, pulling the girl up. His voice was ragged. Now we run. And together, through fire and smoke, they fled deeper into the wreck toward whatever waited in the shadows. The air burned with smoke and static. The reactor's explosion still crackled behind them, sparks snapping across broken walls. The mechanic half carried the alien child through the twisted passages, his arm wrapped tight around her small frame. His back bled from shrapnel wounds. Each step was agony, but he forced his body forward. The child clung to him, her face pressed against his chest, whispering with every breath. They're still coming, they won't stop. He knew she was right. Even broken and scattered, the elite guard never quit. They were predators, trained to track until their prey was gone. The corridors narrowed. Pipes hissed, dripping water and steam. Somewhere above, boots thundered, voices sharp and cold. Seal the lower decks. The human is wounded. He cannot run far. The mechanic's legs shook. His vision blurred. He stumbled, dropping to one knee. The child gasped, trying to help him, but she was too small, too weak. He pressed a hand to the floor, forcing himself up again. His voice was raw. Not yet. We're not finished yet. They pushed deeper, through a hatch that groaned but gave way. The room beyond was wide, dark, filled with rows of rusting machines. Shadows pooled thick across the corners. The mechanic laid the child against the wall, his body trembling. He checked the weapon. Half charge left, maybe less. It would not be enough. His mind raced. Every path ended the same way, with the guard finding them. He looked at the girl. She was staring back at him, her eyes wide but steady. You should leave me, she whispered. If they take me back, maybe they'll let you live. His chest tightened, and for a moment he had no words. Then he knelt beside her, his bloodied hand resting gently on her shoulder. I already lost one daughter, he said softly. I won't lose another. Her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to argue, but no words came. She only held his hand tighter. A sound broke the silence. A click. A shuffle. A faint whir of gears. The mechanic spun, weapon raised. His finger hovered on the trigger. From the shadows stepped a figure, bent, limping, wrapped in rags of old ship uniforms. Metal gleamed where flesh should be. A half-broken droid, patched with scraps, one arm twisted and sparking. Its voice crackled through a damaged speaker. You are not guard. The mechanic kept the weapon steady. His voice was harsh. Stay back. The droid tilted its head, glowing eyes flickering. You carry the child. The girl peeked out from behind the mechanic, her small voice trembling. Who are you? The droid paused, its gears clicking. Designation, Repair Unit 7. This wreck was my ship. I remain alone. The mechanic frowned, still wary. Why haven't the guard destroyed you? The droid's voice crackled with static. They do not care for broken things. Something about the words hit the mechanic deep. Broken things. He looked at the machine, rusted, limping, discarded, and for a moment saw himself. The child stepped closer, her fear shifting into something else. Curiosity. Will you help us? Repair Unit 7's eyes flickered. Help? The guard, hunt you. All who resist, die. The mechanic lowered the weapon slightly. His voice was firm. We're dead already if we don't fight. But if you know this wreck, maybe you can give us a chance. The droid was silent, gears clicking as if it were thinking. At last, it spoke. There are tunnels hidden. I can guide you. The mechanic let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then let's move. But the droid raised its twisted arm. Caution! The guard are near. They hunt like wolves. As if to prove the point, a shout rang out in the corridor. Boots clanged against metal. The guard had found their trail. The mechanic lifted the weapon again. The girl clung to his arm. The droid's broken joints whirred as it stepped forward. I will lead them away, it said. The mechanic blinked. What? Repair Unit 7's voice crackled. I am broken. I am nothing. But I can still be useful. The girl shook her head. No, you'll be destroyed. The droid's eyes flickered, faint and weak. I was destroyed long ago. But if I can buy you time, then perhaps I will mean something again. The mechanic's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to stop it, but the sound of the guard grew louder. They had seconds left. Repair Unit 7 limped toward the door, its metal steps echoing. It turned back once, its voice softer now. Protect the child. That is all that matters. Then it stepped into the corridor. Shouts rang out. Plasma fire lit the dark. The droid's voice echoed in defiance, its broken frame sparking as it fought. The mechanic pulled the child into the shadows, forcing her toward the tunnels the droid had pointed to. His chest ached, but he knew this was the only chance. The girl looked back, tears streaming down her cheeks. He's going to die. The mechanic's voice was rough. He chose to stand. We have to honor that. They slipped into the tunnel, darkness swallowing them again. Behind them, the sounds of battle filled the wreck, metal tearing, plasma roaring, the cries of a broken machine refusing to fall quietly. The mechanic whispered as he pulled the girl deeper into the dark. Even broken things can be brave. The tunnel was narrow, its walls damp and lined with corroded pipes. The air stank of rust and old fuel. Each step echoed faintly, as though the wreck itself whispered their movements back to the hunters. The mechanic half stumbled as he moved, one arm guiding the alien child, the other still clutching the stolen weapon. His back burned from wounds, every breath sharp with pain, but he refused to stop. Behind them, the sounds of battle faded, the clatter of boots, the roar of plasma fire, and the final cry of a machine that had given its last breath for them. The girl's voice trembled in the dark. He saved us. The mechanic's jaw tightened. He could still see the broken droid limping into fire, still hear its voice, thin but defiant. I can still be useful. Yes, he whispered. He did. The girl clung tighter to his sleeve. Why would he do that? He didn't even know us. The mechanic kept walking, his boots scraping the rusted floor. Because sometimes, it's enough to know you're standing for something that matters. The tunnel stretched endlessly, twisting deeper into the wreck. Steam hissed from broken valves, dripping water splashed against their boots. The girl shivered in the cold. He slipped off his torn jacket, wrapping it around her small shoulders. She looked up at him, eyes wide with surprise. "But you'll be cold." He forced a small smile, though his face was pale and drawn. "I've worked in colder places. I'll manage." Her eyes softened, and for the first time she leaned against him, not from fear, but from comfort. The silence didn't last. A metallic clang echoed from above. Then another. Boots. Many boots. The guard was still coming, their formation spreading through the wreck like a tightening trap. The mechanic stopped, listening. The sound was above them, then behind, then ahead. His gut clenched. They were being herded. "They know where we're going," he muttered. The girl's voice cracked. "We're trapped." He gripped the weapon tighter. His body trembled with exhaustion, but his voice was steady. "Not yet." The tunnel opened into a wider chamber. Sand had poured through cracks in the hull, covering the floor in shifting dunes. Above, faint light bled through jagged holes, painting the wreck in silver beams. The mechanic lifted the girl into his arms, wading through the sand. Every step was heavy, his legs burning. But he kept moving. Halfway across, a voice boomed from the shadows. "There is no escape." The guard stepped from the darkness, black armor gleaming under the silver light. Their rifles rose in unison, glowing cores aimed at his chest. The mechanic froze. His arms tightened around the girl, pressing her against his chest. He raised the weapon, though his hands shook. The leader of the squad stepped forward, visor reflecting the light like cold fire. His voice was sharp, absolute. "Human. You have fought well. But it ends here. Surrender the child." The mechanic's throat was dry. His chest ached with every breath. He knew he couldn't win this fight. But still, his answer came firm. "No." The leader tilted his head. "You are broken. Bleeding. You cannot stop us." The mechanic's voice grew harsh. "Maybe. But I can still stand in your way." The soldiers fanned out, cutting off every path. Rifles hummed, the sound of death charging in their cores. The girl buried her face against his chest. "I'm scared," she whispered. He bent his head close, whispering back. "Me too. But that's what makes it mean something when we keep going." He braced himself, ready for the end. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then, a thunderous groan shook the chamber. The wreck shifted, sand cascading from the ceiling. A massive section of hull tore loose above, crashing down between them and the guard. Dust and fire burst into the air. The mechanic didn't hesitate. He grabbed the girl's hand and ran, weaving through the falling debris. The soldiers shouted, scrambling, their formation broken by the sudden collapse. Through the smoke, he spotted a breach in the hull, an opening to the outside. Wind howled through it, carrying the bitter taste of ash. "Come on," he shouted, dragging the girl forward. They stumbled through the breach, out into the wastelands again. The sky was blood red, heavy with clouds of dust. The horizon stretched empty, endless. The mechanic dropped to one knee, gasping for air. His wounds screamed, his strength failing. But when he looked at the girl, he forced himself up again. The guard was already climbing through the wreck, black figures against the smoke. They were relentless. They would never stop. The girl looked up at him, tears streaking her face. "They'll kill you if you keep protecting me." He crouched low, cupping her face with his bloodied hand. His eyes were tired, but fierce. "Then I'll die standing. But I'll never let them take you." The wind howled around them, carrying the sound of the guard's pursuit. The mechanic lifted the weapon again, body shaking but unbroken. He turned toward the horizon, scanning for any path, Any chance? And there far off in the distance he saw it. A faint glow of lights. A settlement, hidden in the dunes. His heart surged. Hope. He scooped the girl into his arms once more. Hold on. We've got somewhere to run. The wasteland stretched before them, endless and merciless. Behind them, the guard gave chase, their voices cold and sharp. But the mechanic ran. One step after another. Broken, bleeding, but unyielding. Because shields don't break. The wasteland wind cut like knives, carrying dust that stung the eyes and burned the throat. The mechanic staggered across the dunes, every step a battle. His arms shook as he carried the alien child, but he refused to let her go. Far ahead, the faint glow of lights flickered. A settlement. Not large, but alive. The promise of walls, of people, of safety. The girl lifted her head weakly from his shoulder, her voice barely more than a whisper. Is it real? Yes, he rasped. His lungs burned, his wounds bled, but his eyes locked on those distant lights. We're almost there. Behind them, the howl of engines rose. The guard had mounted their bikes again. Their black silhouettes cut across the horizon, closing fast. The girl's fingers clutched at his torn shirt. They're coming. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The growl of the engines told him everything. Hold on tight, he muttered. He forced his legs to move faster, stumbling through the shifting dunes. Each step sent fire through his veins, but he pressed on. His vision blurred. His body begged to fall. But the thought of her being torn from his arms lit a fire that no pain could quench. The lights of the settlement grew clearer, walls of metal and stone, watchtowers rising above. He could almost hear the faint sound of voices carried on the wind. Then plasma fire seared past, exploding in the sand at his feet. The ground shook, spraying hot shards into his legs. The guard had reached them. He turned, weapon raised. His hands trembled, but his aim was steady. He fired. The blast struck a bike, sending it spinning into the sand in a burst of fire. The others spread out, circling like wolves. Plasma bolts streaked across the dunes, lighting the wasteland with fire and smoke. The mechanic dropped low, shielding the girl with his body. Heat scorched across his back, but he did not let go. He rose again, firing wildly, forcing them back. But each shot drained the weapon, the glow of its chamber fading. The girl's voice broke through the chaos. You can't fight them all. His jaw clenched. His voice was harsh but unyielding. Then I'll fight until I fall. The guard closed in, their formation tightening. Engines roared, rifles aimed. The leader's voice echoed across the dunes, sharp and merciless. Human. You have nowhere left to run. Surrender the child. The mechanic's chest heaved. His vision swam. He could barely feel his legs. But his grip on the weapon did not falter. He spat blood into the sand and shouted back, his voice raw. You'll have to kill me first. The bike surged forward, engines screaming. The mechanic planted his feet, weapon raised, body trembling but unbroken. The girl pressed against his chest, her tears hot against his torn shirt. Please, she whispered, don't leave me. He bent his head, his words soft even as the storm of death closed in. I'm not leaving. I'll never leave. He fired again. Another guard went down in fire and smoke. The others swarmed closer, plasma bolts tearing the sand into molten glass around him. The weapon hissed, its charge nearly gone. One more shot, maybe two. That was all. The mechanic's body shook. He knew this was the end. But then horns. A sharp sound cut through the chaos. A siren's wail. From the settlement, lights flared brighter. Shadows moved on the walls. Figures armed with rifles rose in the towers, voices shouting. The defenders had seen them. Bolts of fire streaked from the walls, slamming into the guard. 2 bikes exploded in showers of sparks. The formation broke. The hunters turned their visors toward the settlement, recalculating the battle. The mechanic's knees buckled. Relief hit him like a wave, but he did not collapse. He forced himself forward, dragging the child toward the walls. The guard roared in fury. Their leader raised his weapon, his voice echoing like thunder. No one takes her. She belongs to the Empire. He fired. A plasma bolt screamed across the dunes. The mechanic twisted, shielding the child with his own body. The blast struck his side, burning deep. He stumbled, gasping, his knees buckling. The girl screamed. No. He forced himself up, though his vision dimmed. He shoved her forward, toward the walls. His voice was a rasp, broken but fierce. Run. Don't stop. But she clung to him, refusing to let go. Tears streamed down her silver cheeks. I won't leave you. The guard pressed closer, fury driving them through the storm of fire from the walls. Their black armor gleamed in the chaos, unstoppable, merciless. The mechanic staggered, weapon heavy in his hand. His body was broken. His strength was gone. But his eyes burned. He planted himself in the sand, the child behind him, the guard before him. His voice rose, raw and defiant, cutting through the roar of battle. You want her, he shouted. You'll go through me. The weapon hummed its final charge. The guard charged, engines screaming, rifles glowing. The last stand had begun. The dunes shook with fire and fury. The guard surged forward, their engines screaming, their rifles glowing like suns. The mechanic stood alone in the sand, his battered body trembling, his weapon humming with its final charge. Behind him, the alien child clung to his shirt, her small hands shaking but refusing to let go. Tears streaked her silver cheeks, but her eyes burned with something new, not just fear, but defiance. The mechanic's chest heaved. Blood ran down his side, his legs barely held him upright. But his voice rose, raw and unbroken. You'll never take her. The leader of the guard raised his rifle, visor gleaming cold. Then you will die. The bikes roared closer. Plasma bolts streaked the air, the sand exploding around him. The mechanic lifted the weapon, his arms heavy as iron. He fired. The beam screamed across the dunes, striking a bike and ripping it apart in a burst of fire. The rider's scream vanished into smoke. The chamber of the weapon hissed. Its glow faded. The power was gone. The mechanic's heart clenched. Empty. The guard closed in, their rifles aimed, their voices shouting in triumph. The child's voice cracked through the chaos. Don't stop. Please, don't stop. He looked down at her, her tiny frame pressed against him, her eyes begging him not to fall. And in that moment, he felt something deeper than pain, deeper than fear. He felt her trust. And he refused to break it. With a roar, he hurled the empty weapon aside and spread his arms wide, his body a shield. Plasma fire slammed into him, burning, tearing, but he did not fall. He held himself upright, every muscle screaming, every wound bleeding, but his body stood between the guard and the child. The girl screamed his name, but he didn't hear it. His ears were filled with the roar of fire, his vision a haze of red. The guard leader stepped forward, visor gleaming, rifle raised for the killing shot. You are nothing. A broken man protecting a child who will never be yours. The mechanic spat blood, his voice a whisper but filled with steel. Then I'll be broken, forever. The rifle flared. And a blast of fire struck the leader from the side. The settlement's defenders had arrived. Dozens of figures stormed the dunes, rifles blazing, their war cries cutting through the wasteland. Plasma bolts rained down from the walls, tearing into the guards' formation. The hunters who had seemed unstoppable now faltered, broken by the storm. Bikes exploded. Armor shattered. The guard fell one by one under the fury of the settlement's fire. The leader staggered, his armor smoking. He turned back toward the mechanic, fury twisting his voice. "This isn't over." He lunged, rifle raised. But the mechanic, bleeding and broken, surged forward with one final burst of strength. He slammed into the leader with all he had left, driving him into the sand. The rifle fired wide, plasma exploding harmlessly into the sky. The mechanic's fists hammered against the leader's visor, sparks flying, until at last the glass cracked, then shattered. The leader fell still, his armor smoking in the sand. The mechanic collapsed beside him, his body finally giving in. The child dropped to her knees, pulling at his shoulders, her tears falling on his face. "No. Stay with me." His breath was shallow, ragged. His eyes fluttered, then locked onto hers. He forced a smile through the blood. "You're safe, that's all that matters." Her small hands gripped his, refusing to let go. "Please, don't leave me. I need you." His chest rose one last time. His whisper was soft, almost lost to the wind. "You'll never be alone again." And then he went still. The settlement's defenders rushed around them, finishing off the last of the guard. Shouts filled the dunes, the sound of victory and grief mingled as one. The girl knelt beside the fallen mechanic, her tiny hands clinging to his. For a moment, she felt only despair. Then she heard the voices of the defenders. They had seen her crest. They knew who she was. "Protect her," one shouted. "She's the heir," another cried. Arms lifted her gently, carrying her toward the safety of the settlement. But even as they carried her away, she twisted back, her eyes fixed on the broken man lying in the sand. A man who had been nothing. A mechanic. A worker. A nobody. But to her, he had been everything. A shield. And though his body was gone, the memory of his stand would live forever, not just in her heart, but in the story whispered across the stars. The story of the human who shielded an alien child with his life, and proved that even the smallest spark of defiance can set the galaxy alight.